Okay, so now here's one letter like this. Or a few letters that we're going to be looking at. Whatever's taking the ideas that we learned about, that Hashem is depending on you, and therefore you better show up and do what you have to. Never applies that to people's very specific lives. So I collected 4 letters altogether. The first one was sent to me by my cousin, actually. He sent me this letter, and it's an amazing, unbelievable letter. So let's read together. The page looks like this.
I'm interested in this, so go through it very quickly because it's Yiddish and Hebrew.
Okay, I'll try to slow down.
Yeah. Is that an exclamation mark where he says shalom?
Yes. Okay, so it starts. Baruch Hashem, Yud Zayin Elul, Hey Shin Yud Saf, Tav Shin Yud. So this is 1950, the 17th of Elul. So this is in that period when the previous Rebbe had already passed away. The previous Rebbe passed away 5 months before this. And it's still 6-7 months. How many ever? The other way around. The previous Rebbe had passed away 8 months before this, Shvat. Right? Other Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz of Elul. The previous Rebbe had passed away 8 months before this, and it's still going to be Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Teves, Shvat. Still 5 months before the Rebbe will officially, publicly accept the leadership. So it's a very raw, emotional time in Chabad in general. For the Rebbe, certainly personally, he's at this time the Hasidim are pushing him to accept upon himself the leadership as Rebbe, and they're slowly taking on that role. So this is the time period that we're in. Okay, the 17th of Elul in the year 1950. Ha'avrech and titles, and then it doesn't say the name is redacted. Oftentimes the name is published, sometimes later the name is not published. But in this case, the name is redacted. Really? I thought it was something about stuff. Yeah, this anyway. Shalom v'bracha, greetings and blessings. That's what that means. The Ma'inal Mechtava, in response to his letter, right? It's written very formally in the third person, but we'll translate it in the first person, you. The Ma'inal Mechtava, in response to your letter, from the 28th of Av, so that would be a couple weeks earlier, in which you describe your situation, umatik, and you quote Masha Kosavloi, that which was written to you, Chak Much Admor Hakam, by my father-in-law of blessed memory. Okay, so you quote part of the letter that you had sent to my father-in-law, the previous Rebbe.
Which word says blessed memory?
So it's not exactly blessed memory. It's the last 3 letters there. Hey Chaf Mem, which stands for Hareni Kaparas Mishkavai. It's a terminology that one uses in the first year after someone else passes. I am like an atonement for his resting.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Okay, I translated it loosely.
No, that's good. I didn't know you can. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Anyway, so in that letter that the previous Rebbe had sent to you, he says that you should organize classes, Torah classes in your home. And you should put efforts into increasing the number of participants in this learning group. So you write to me about that. Gam Kaisivli, you also write to me, Shes Asik the Kibbutz Ladim, institutions of the previous Rebbe, and the Rebbe's actually work while his father-in-law was still Rebbe, to organize something called Mesiba Shabbos. My grandmother used to do it here in Montreal. Chaim knows more details, which is to collect kids on Shabbos afternoon and Saturday afternoon. Kids are roaming the streets doing nothing. Some of those kids are in public schools, so they have free time. Bring them all together, share them a good Jewish story. They should say words of Torah. They should say a pasuk, say a bracha, have some candy, give them a nice Shabbos feel. It's called Mesiba Shabbos. So the previous Rebbe, my father-in-law, told you to do this as well. And sometimes even during the week. You're not just that my father-in-law told you to do it, but you're actually doing it. Sometimes even during the week, you're collecting these kids and sharing them words of Torah, inspiration, and whatnot. Right? This is 1950s. These are all kids from directly post-war parents, survivors from a couple of years earlier, and a lot of them, many of them, are not going to Jewish schools. There aren't available Jewish schools, so they're not interested in Jewish schools, but they're all very Jewish. So it's part of the outreach effort, of the early outreach of Chabad. Okay. Now, even now, you continue to describe. You have set time for learning. But it seems from your letter that you write, you have no self-satisfaction from this. And you feel you're missing something. The shoyl daiti, but then you're asking me my opinion. So this is an unfamiliar sort of situation. When we go through the checklist, we're doing everything right, but something feels missing. Like we feel like something's missing. This is not enough. I imagine this is not an unfamiliar feeling. You can't pinpoint a specific thing you're not doing right. Like, okay, if I did that, things are going to shape up, right? You're doing everything right. You've got all these things going on. You're doing what you're supposed to. You're reaching out to other kids. You're teaching Torah. You have your Torah time, but something's missing. You feel you don't have that satisfaction. Something feels like it's missing. Okay, so when you think of such a situation, you feel like, what's the person missing? A little joy. He's missing a little joy in life. He's missing a little gratitude for what he has. A little. He should learn to appreciate all the blessings. Right. So what does that tell him? It seems, to my view, what you are missing, is accepting upon yourself the sovereignty of heaven. You're missing that, the acceptance of duty. And that's, if you accept a duty, you'd feel more satisfied. Right? With everything we learned in the other talk, we understand that. Duty, the way the Rebbe seems it, if you appreciate it, that Hashem is relying on everything you're doing, and you would do it with a sense of duty because Hashem is relying on me, you'd have a whole other satisfaction in what you're doing. This service of duty, Kabbalah's oil, is the foundation and root of all service. And in order to achieve this sense of duty, the sense of accepting upon myself the yoke of sovereignty of heaven, you don't require some unique and deep contemplation. It's not so difficult. You don't have to go through some long process of contemplating to the point that you accept upon yourself. You don't have to do that. You just have to envision. Let the Holy One, blessed be He, King of Kings, created His world. And after He created the world, He created man and gave you a soul. This is the life that's right now pumping through your body. And God standing by you, He's looking and gazing, and He's investigating your heart and your reins. Every act, every word, and every step you take, Hashem is counting. That's all you have to do. Just envision that. Now there it adds. In order to make it easier for you to achieve this type of work, God granted you the merit that you're a chassid. That you're a chassid. God granted you that gift that you're also a chassid to make all this easier. The Hainu meaning to say, that your neshama, he prat min nishmas hatzadik haklolis. Your neshama is like a detail, or is like a singular derivative of the general grand neshama of the tzaddik. That's what it means to be a chassid. The Rebbe has a neshama that's neshama klolis. That's an incorporative neshama that incorporates many others, and you are a specific neshama of that grander neshama, and you have, as a detail, have a direct link to that grand neshama. That's what it means to be a chassid. This is what's been granted to you, gifted to you in your connection to the Rebbe. And therefore, if something is missing, something is lacking within the individual soul, my particular soul, through the appropriate connection and bond to the general tzaddik, whatever is missing in his particular life gets filled by his connection to the general soul, the tzaddik. So if I feel like something's missing, it's because my particular soul is not adequately connected to the proper big soul, the tzaddik soul. And if I was connected, I'd feel it all. And my sense of duty would be completely bolstered. I would feel it. And he continues. The Rebbe said, the Rebbe was talking about his father-in-law. Remember, this is still within the year after his father-in-law's passing. The Rebbe is still saying Kaddish every day, 3 times a day for his father-in-law. The Rebbe said, the Fader specifically, he said explicitly, that when he, my father-in-law, accepted upon himself to be the leader of Chabad, so the Rebbe is saying that my father-in-law told me this, or said so explicitly, that when he became Rebbe, he only accepted the leadership on condition that his leadership should be with kindness and compassion. Things should be in a compassionate fashion. That's how his leadership should be. And from then, Mishnas Tov Reish Pei, from the year Tov Reish Pei, which would be 1920, when his father-in-law became Rebbe, 30 years earlier, until now, 1950, he stands and serves, and he bestows to his students, to his Hasidim, and to all those connected to him, koyach, strength, v'chayis, and life, b'avodas Hashem, in the service of Hashem. Which includes in that, in the service of Hashem, whether we're talking about things that are between the parts of your service of Hashem that are connected to your direct relationship with God, or whether they are things about between you and your fellow man. Okay, so you've been blessed to be a chassid, which means you have a direct connection to this grand neshama, which you are a detail of, and you strengthen your connection to the tzaddik. He took it upon himself. It's all going to be compassionately and beautifully and goodly without hardship. So you plug in, and the things you're missing, which, as Rebbe tells him, is you're missing the sense of duty, will be filled. Continues the Rebbe. Every paragraph requires like all pabrengit. In addition to all of this, the Rebbe chose you specifically, the hit to the love, and gave you shlichus miyuchedes, a very specific mission. Right? He writes before that the previous Rebbe told him to have shiurim in his house and to collect kids as part of the Mississippi Shabbat program. So the Rebbe selected you to give you a very specific, defined mission. The Yadua is known al pi nigla, even according, never mind the Hasidic level, even just the basic halachic level. Halacha is that the messenger of a person carries the power of the mission of the one who sent you on the mission. That's the halacha. The power of attorney. If I appoint you to sign a contract or whatever the mission I give you is, you have power of attorney. You have all the power that's invested in me is now invested in you. Right? So it's therefore understood that in this mission that the Rebbe gives you, the Rebbe gave you of his power to you so you can fulfill that mission. As explained in the Maimer of the 18th of Elul of this year. So just to explain, the previous Rebbe had, before he passed, had already had discourses set up that will be published throughout the time to come. So he passed away, but those discourses still got published. So even after the previous Rebbe had passed, there was still like fresh discourses being produced that he had published, including 18th of Elul, which is one day after this letter is written. This letter written on the 17th of Elul. So in the discourse of 18th of Elul, there it's explained Asher mitzvah loshen tzavsa v'chibur. That mitzvah comes from the terminology of connection. The word mitzvah doesn't only mean commandment; it also means connection. And it's explained there in that Maimer at length, using an analogy. By a person fulfilling the command and the instruction of someone who's much wiser than them, or someone who's a king over them, even if he doesn't understand the content and the meaning of the mission, and he doesn't appreciate the great value of the mission he's been given. But knowing that this was instructed to me by someone who is the king, or knowing that this was instructed to me by someone who's a wise person who's way beyond my comprehension, my joy in fulfilling that mission should be infinite. Knowing that this huge person, this is the analogy the previous Rebbe gives, when God instructs you to do a mitzvah, so you don't appreciate the mitzvah, so what? Knowing that Hashem commanded you, and knowing that through that you get to make a connection to the King of Kings who asked you to do it, that itself should blow your mind and give you the great joy. Right? Because in that act of fulfilling the mission, even if he doesn't understand what the mission is all about, you connect with the essence of the wise person who instructed you to do so, and with the essence of the king who instructed you. So that itself should bring you joy. So read that Maimer and apply it to your situation. The Rebbe chose you to give you a very specific mission. You have your mission laid out in front of you, and you're kvetching. You're kvetching because you don't appreciate the value of taking upon yourself duty. Don't you realize that you've been given this incredible mission, and you're part of this huge mission, so you don't understand how your little part plays a role? That's your issue. Realize where it comes from. Realize where the duty comes from, and realize that you have a Rebbe that granted you the ability to see this to understand this with a very specific, clear guidelines. That's the writes in the next paragraph. After all this, you have all of this. You have a Rebbe, you have clear instruction, you have this teaching that tells you that when you have a duty and that when a king instructs you, that should bring you joy, knowing that this is the king himself and you get to connect to the king himself in fulfilling this mission. You're complaining still that you don't find satisfaction, and you don't feel enthusiasm. All you feel like is something's missing. Aren't you realizing what you have here? Well, you see, when the Rebbe tells him, don't you realize what you have here? The Rebbe doesn't tell him, don't you realize how much blessings you have? Don't you realize the duty that you have? Don't you realize the privilege you have to serve in such a clear fashion with clear guidance and connection to our Rebbe? Don't you realize that? Im lakulehu nishma. Even if this sounds light, nonetheless, you should completely abandon all this kvetching, all this complaining. This extra, self pity, and the way you feel about yourself. What am I missing? What do I have? Stop focusing on all that. And you should consider in the unbelievable, beautiful portion that you have been granted. You are a student and connected to our leader, more the previous Rebbe. You should rejoice in a great joy in your lot. In this lot. And you should bring that joy down into literal actions to fulfill and to implement the desire of the one who sent you. All the power has been given to you for this. All you're missing is your will to commit yourself. And when you put aside all of your personal desires, in the face of the will of the Rebbe, the leader, which directly transmits to you divine will, this itself will be the vehicle. This will give you enthusiasm in all of your activities in the fulfilling of the mission that the previous Rebbe had given you. If I brag about this, yeah, the birchas ksiva v'chasimah with blessings for a good year. I'm a service, waiting to hear from you good news. I want to hear. I'm waiting to hear good news from you that you've added effort to your work. Whether you're doing internal work on yourself, whether you're talking about work you're doing with others. And I want to hear news that you are fulfilling the verse which says, serve God with joy. They have a signature, and Rebbe says, I include here that Kudus, that mimer that I mentioned earlier from the 18th of Elul. What time do you have?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay, this is a very, very powerful letter.
What did he send us?
The name is redacted.
Okay.
The name is redacted, so I don't know who sent it to. It's sent to, but there's so much in here that can all further understood in light of everything we learned in the last week.
He wrote this all in Hebrew. There's no Yiddish in here, it seems.
Yeah, most letters are written in Hebrew.
Because I know Yiddish is written in Hebrew, right?
Hebrew letters, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Rebbe would usually, like most Rebbes for sure, but even most Torah leaders at the time would speak in Yiddish and write in Hebrew. It's very, very common sort of rabbinic communication. Anyway, so in light of everything we learned just last week, that taking upon yourself the duty under is this notion that Hashem is relying on you. You've been given a specific mission in a specific place in a specific time, and you've been granted a Rebbe that's able to give you that clarity to see that you've been given a specific mission at a certain time and a certain place. And you've been granted a Rebbe that teaches you that everything you do is important. And you're kvetchik. Plug in a little bit. Realize how valuable your duty is and start fulfilling your duty. Stop busying yourself with, am I missing something? Am I not missing something? It's just such an arishkeit and such silliness. You're part of the biggest mission that ever existed in the world of the history of ever. And you're busy with what you're missing and don't missing. if you start realizing how big the fulfillment of your duty is and what it's part of and who you're connected to and what you're connecting to when you do this, you don't have time to think about all this other knowledge, what you're missing and not missing. You'll be filled with the greatest joy that you have the privilege to be part of this. To quote someone I know, he says, stop busying yourself with yourself, right? Yeah. Okay, and so I'm not sure when the rabbi's coming back. Okay, so Monday morning we'll still learn.
This year's,
3 more
this
letters
year's
that
Monday.
I collected here, all on the same subject.
Yeah, it was like a Tony Robbins of the day.
Monday, Mitzvah Shem, yeah.
Wake up, boss.
Okay,
Wake up! Don't you know what you're doing?
read this letter again, and Shabbos, I'm reading a little bit more about Hashem on this.
That was like the author, whoever it was, wrote in. It was Avra. He wrote in and he said, I wanted inspiration. What about it? Like it was your Uncle Chaim said, it's a privilege to serve, yeah?
I want to serve.
Shkoyach.
Okay, have a good
Thank
day.
you. Thank you.
Good night.
Good Shabbos.